EvolutionRadioFreedomSlips.com, where you don't need to expect us. We're already here and coming at you now. It is Evolution with Miss Eva Moore.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Eva. I'm back in action. Merry Christmas, everyone. I hope everyone's had a good Christmas season leading up here. It's been quite intense and beautiful at the same time. The price of gas is drastically dropping. The cost of...
Hi, Eva.
Hi, Scott. And tonight my guest is Scott Bennett. And we're going to be talking about his amazing...
You hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me, Scott?
I can hear you now.
Okay, great. Welcome to the show, Scott. Thanks for being here today, and we're going to be talking about your amazing journey here in your whistleblowing adventures and the courage under fire that you've exhibited and that you're still exhibiting to this day. And it's a pleasure to have you, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it very much.
Okay, so to start, I think what I would start with is this story kind of climaxes while you're incarcerated in federal prison, and you get partnered into the same facility with Brad Birkinshaw. Is that how you say his last name?
Birkenfeld,
sorry.
Yes.
And can you, for the audience, for somebody that doesn't understand who Brad is and the importance of his story, can you just give us a little bit of background? Because he's quite the character.
Sure. Brad Birkenfeld is he's an American citizen who became a Swiss banker. He worked overseas in Switzerland. Grew up on the East Coast. His father was a neurosurgeon. Very intelligent man. He went over in the 90s and he was working for a variety of banks, a variety of Swiss banks, and eventually took a position at Union Bank of Switzerland. And he had begun discovering nefarious activities within the Swiss bank community, specifically UBS, a lot of political skullduggery that involved high-level congressmen and senators. He challenged a lot of the Union Bank of Switzerland executives about some of the activities that were going on, and a lot of the hidden accounts and a lot of things that it just struck him as problematic and unconstitutional and things of that nature. I know Senator Phil Gramm was one of the politicians that he called out on the floor, and there were a lot of Hollywood liberal elites who had Swiss banking accounts that were undisclosed and not paying in taxes, besides a variety of terrorist finance accounts that were going through Union Bank of Switzerland, being money laundered into a variety of activities in the Middle East. And Brad had challenged Union Bank of Switzerland on this and had begun to make a case that was going to be reported to the U.S. authorities. And he got in a lot of conflict, a lot of hot water with UBS. But to make a long story short, he had been approached by the Central Intelligence Agency when he was in Geneva, Switzerland, to begin giving them information, begin serving as an intelligence source. And that culminated and climaxed in an episode where Brad was lured into a social event drinking experience where he went out with some people that he didn't know were in the CIA at the time and was caught up in a drunk driving episode. He was entrapped with it, I should say. And he was taken into a Swiss jail, and the next day the CIA operative who had lured him into this DUI trap, had come into the jail and got him out of prison, flashed his CIA badge, and got him out. And all of this Brad told me and told others that when I had met him much later. And he couldn't believe it. He had never worked in the intelligence circles or any of these agencies, so he was sort of, a duck out of water. And I think he got a whiff that they were trying to recruit him, and he knew his entire livelihood would be at risk within the Swiss banking community. He could be put in jail in Switzerland if he betrayed any secrets. So he basically packed his bags and his case and took all of the intelligence that he had and came over to the United States and started to try and report this matter directly to the Department of Justice. Eric Holder, Lanny Brewer, who were the head chiefs of the DOJ at the time. I recall he had meetings with Kevin Downing and a Kevin O'Connor, who were attorneys at the Department of Justice, and he was basically laughed out. He was shut down. He was ignored. And I think what had happened, being someone who's experienced with the intelligence circles, the CIA were working in conjunction with the Department of Justice and trying to shut him down and trying to contain a lot of the material that he had. So they refused to give him a subpoena. They refused to allow him to provide the information that he had. And instead of waiting around for them, he ran over to the IRS and tried to get a subpoena to provide material. They refused to give it to him. Then he went to the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and they refused to give it to him. Finally, the Senate gave him a subpoena, and he was at that point allowed to come in and give a lot of the material behind closed doors under seal. But it was quite an episode, and Brad had also conveyed that a very strange thing had happened involving the Department of Justice and CIA and these groups. And that was that a London banker friend of Brad's from the Union Bank of Switzerland had been notified by Union Bank of Switzerland that they had received a letter signed by Brad's friend alleging that Brad was giving intelligence to the U.S. authorities. And his friend said, "I never sent you any such letter." And UBS sent the guy the letter. His name was Mohammed something. He was a London banker, but he was Middle Eastern in name. And his friend got a copy of this letter, faxed or sent to him by UBS, and it said July 2007. Didn't say July 15th or July 1st. It said July 2007. And it didn't have his signature. It just had his name typed, and the letter said, "Brad Birkenfeld is giving materials. You need to be aware of this." And he sent it to Brad and said, "I never wrote this letter. I don't know who did." And what we concluded was that when Brad went into the Department of Justice, the only way that they could have known that Brad knew this person was if they tapped his phone and fabricated this letter. So right then and there, Brad was a walking example of the NSA, CIA, Department of Justice, tapping a phone and forging a letter with the hope that he was going to be nailed, killed, or imprisoned by the Swiss authorities for giving this information to the American authorities. And then a lot of this came out much later. Brad had shared with me WikiLeaks cables that Julian Assange's organization had dug up, and they came from the Department of State Counterterrorism Office, and they described the Department of State under Hillary Clinton working in conjunction with the Department of Justice in getting Swiss treaty benefits and putting together a deal to basically hang Birkenfeld because he had exploded onto the scene all of this material dealing with Swiss banks and terrorist financing and hidden accounts. Now, what makes all that significant was Brad had come over to the United States, tried to give this material to the Senate, tried to give it to the Department of Justice, and no one took it from him, and instead they imprisoned him. What was significant is my job in the military and as a contractor in Booz Allen Hamilton was to track down those very sources of terrorist financing, those bank accounts. And when I discovered all this, when Brad shared it with me and showed me the accounts, showed me the WikiLeaks cables, showed me all of his materials, I said, you're telling me no one from the Department of Justice, no one in the military or the Department of State or the CIA ever sat down with you and debriefed you to see its applications to military missions, military operations? He said, never, not once. No one in uniform, no one in any agency, no one in the military ever sat down with me and debriefed me on all this material. You are the first one. And I said, well, that's exactly what my job was. And had I met you before, I could have emptied your pockets, and in one night, we could have tracked down 90% of all these terrorist finance accounts. And the fact that that never happened is either severe incompetence or a cover-up or a conspiracy or corruption. And that's how Brad and I started piecing all this together.
I think that's amazing. Just the fact that the serendipitous nature of the two of you ending up, the very person who was fighting to give his testimony ends up partnered with the very person who is, positioned to receive this type of testimony, and yet it happens under the guise and cover of, federal indictment and incarceration. And so it's just very it's a beautiful story in and of itself, and it's one that most people have not even heard of.
Yeah.
They're just only now starting to hear about Snowden. And so
yes.
Just to kind of draw the points of access of connection here, the way that this rolls out is right now there's a lady by the name of Jesslyn Raddick who is representing Snowden, one of his legal team. And she works for an organization called GAP, Government Accountability Project. Now, Jesslyn Raddick is representing Snowden, but also was successful in representing Brad.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
So the fact that Brad did get to a place where he finally did receive somebody to fairly represent him, and would you say that he was successfully represented?
Well, when Brad and I ended up in the same prison together, which you couldn't make up, it was a miraculous turn of events, and we wind up in the same prison, and we start to connect the dots. We start to discover all this information, and he says, there's a gal representing me named Jesslyn Raddick. She's put my wiki page together. She's out working with my attorneys to get all this reversed and all this known. You need to make contact with her. You need to connect with her and provide all of your military expertise so on the outside we can get a Senate hearing and pull you in to say, this is the man who knows all the military dimensions of the terrorist financing accounts that I tried to bring to you, that you've thrown me in jail and you've never allowed to even be heard. So please give me a Senate hearing, and by the way, bring this guy, Scott Bennett, in, and he'll tell you, because I'm not the expert in military stuff, Scott Bennett is. So that was the plan. Brad was networking that through Jesslyn Raddick and his lawyers, Stephen Cohn, David Cohn, and Stephen Colapinto. They're Cohn, and Colapinto, this law firm in Washington, D.C., and there's some funny business there because Stephen Cohn and David Cohn are brothers. One Cohn is at Gap, and the other one is in charge of this Cohn and Colapinto law firm in D.C. And there's some real funny crossovers there. But I wrote Jesslyn Raddick. She contacted an attorney of mine in Washington, D.C. named Jeff O'Toole, and Brad was passionate to say, you need to connect with this guy. You need to talk to him. And I wrote her, and I sent his lawyers materials and documents establishing who I was and information that was unclassified about the work I did in terrorist financing. And I said, all of this is extremely relevant because soldiers are being killed because of all these finance accounts. They haven't been shut down, and we need to track this. I know it because that was my job. I know this world. And Jesslyn Raddick did absolutely nothing. And I was flabbergasted. His lawyers did absolutely nothing. Why? Either they were paid off or warned by CIA and others, or they were just, severely stupid and incompetent. I think they were paid off because On September 11th, 2012, the same day as Benghazi, Brad Birkenfeld was paid $104 million. And prior to that, on August 1st, Brad got out of prison, and we together submitted a letter to General James Mattis, the commander of U.S. Central Command, and it said, "My name is Brad Birkenfeld. I'm the Swiss banker. I've brought all this information to the Department of Justice, Eric Holder, Lanny Brewer, and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and none of this material has ever been shared with you, General Mattis. Please debrief me immediately so I can provide this intel for you. And here are all the people that are involved: Booz Allen Hamilton, Troy Hensley, Dov Zakheim, Bill Lubliner, etc., etc." And that letter went to General Mattis. And it was 1 month after that that Brad was paid, on September 11th, 2012, the same day as Benghazi, which is very suspicious. Now, Jesselyn Radick has since become Edward Snowden's lawyer. Now, what's significant is Brad Birkenfeld, when he was in the DUI situation in Switzerland, Edward Snowden was a CIA analyst in Geneva, Switzerland. And Ed Snowden described to Glenn Greenwald in his article to The Guardian when he first came out in May of 2013 that one of the moments of turning Snowden against the intelligence agencies because of their corruption was seeing what they did to the Swiss banker Brad Birkenfeld in Switzerland by getting him into a false DUI to extort information out of him. So suddenly you've got Snowden describing exactly what Birkenfeld told me happened and told others about CIA and developing him in a DUI to get information out of him. So you have Snowden, Birkenfeld, and right in the middle is Jesselyn Radick, who's represented both of them. And Jesselyn Radick knows me from Birkenfeld and my attorney in Washington. So she's right at the hub. She's the center of the wheel, if you will, that's connected all three of us. And about September 25th, 2012, was when I wrote my report to U.S. Civil Affairs Psychological Operations Command General Jeffrey Jacobs saying, "Sir, I am an officer in the United States Army. I'm illegally imprisoned in a federal prison for duties I was performing as a military officer. It's unconstitutional. I've requested military attorneys. Please debrief me. In addition, I've discovered material that's essential to our mission dealing with threat finance, specifically Swiss bank accounts." And I outlined in that report all of the Birkenfeld materials and sent it up the chain of command. Sent it to General Jeffrey Jacobs, sent it to his subordinate, Lieutenant Colonel Bockham Folk at Fort Bragg, and then proceeded to send it on to the House and Senate Armed Services Committees, Intelligence Committees, Dianne Feinstein, Buck McKeon, John Boehner, about over 100 senators and congressmen. And none of them did anything with it. Didn't do a single thing. Ignored it completely. Tried to completely cover it up and bury it. And about three months after that was when Snowden saw my report bouncing around the TSSCI channels, and Snowden was a Booz Allen Hamilton man, saw my report and started connecting the dots. Recognized Birkenfeld and what had happened to him in Switzerland, and then shortly after that, contacted Laura Poitras, Glenn Greenwald, and then a few months later got out, went to Hong Kong, and made all of his information known. So a lot of things are interconnected. A lot of dominoes were falling, but they're all interrelated. And so you couldn't make it up. It's all documented.
From what I'm understanding, and what I would really love the listeners to understand, is that you were kind of like the first dozen of dominoes that set the chain of events in place that eventually ended up in Edward Snowden and, say, for example, Chelsea Manning taking the steps that they took to really ensure that the public became aware of what was going on in the financing of terrorism, and that there were good American people doing their jobs that were being roadblocked by a certain faction of the government that had either been coerced or cowtailed into submission, and basically they had sold out one way or another. Whether it was by, since Posse Comitatus is gone, and Blackwater has been given contracts to operate on American soil, at this point we don't know if these factions of government have been literally threatened, or their loved ones have been threatened for their lives, or if they have, been bought out financially, or if they've got some skeleton in their closet, which most people who make it anywhere do, that is held over their heads. So at this point, what we're now getting to is the good stuff. And what I really, before we go to break here, in a few minutes, what I really want the listeners to hear is the due diligence that you did effectively in your career to gather the evidence and systematically document all of the information that then led to people like Snowden taking the steps that they did. That information is available on your website, and you have geniusly created 3 books that are very cost effective and fair priced. Anyone out there can afford these books and can literally go onto your website right now and download these 3 reports that you've now made into books, which is genius because, let's face it, this is the golden egg. Your work is the golden egg. Your work is what the fuss is all about. And this is really what the American people need. They need this in their fingertips. They need somebody that can walk them through it no matter what their background is. They need to understand where their tax dollars have gone and why people such as yourself and Snowden were so committed, and Chelsea and Manning, to literally giving up the rest of their lives for their oaths that they have sworn a duty to protect and defend the Constitution against foreign and domestic skullduggery. That's exactly precisely right. And those documents are court exhibits. Those documents have been submitted to the Florida Federal District Court, and they will be exhibits brought in to the criminal case, which is coming to a head over the next few months. And they will be used, and they've been, over the last 2 years, they've been sent to the court, and it's taken this long to get this back in front of the court. But it's amazing because the court's fully aware of it. Judge Virginia Hernandez Covington is fully aware of it. Now, another thing that just came to me lately, someone sent me, that the law firm in Washington, D.C., Covington and Burling, where Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer worked before they went to the Department of Justice, that law firm represented Union Bank of Switzerland. My judge is Judge Virginia Hernandez Covington, connected family-wise to the law firm Covington and Burling in Washington, D.C. I never knew that until much, much later. Are there weird connections? Are there weird familiarities? Obviously so. Covington was appointed by the Bush administration. She should have recused herself entirely from my case because she lectures at universities where Booz Allen gives money. But there are some real strange connections that are involved in this. But the documents that are books on the case are all, printed at cost. But they're for people to take, to learn, and then to call their congressmen and senators and media and say, what have you done about this? Here's a military officer who's reported financing that's now going to ISIS and ISIL and all the Syria campaigns and the Iraqi episodes, and you've been given this material since 2012, and you've never done anything about it. You've never contacted Bennett. You've never debriefed Bennett. You've never debriefed Birkenfeld. In fact, you've covered it up. You bribed him $104 million. And all of that is in plain black and white. And the American citizen can take that and go right to the wall with their congressmen or their senators and pin them and say, you are in violation of your oath as a political representative.
You've committed treason against the United States. There's a legal case for that. And you've also caused men and women to die and lose their legs and arms because they've been blown up by roadside bombs or bullets that have been purchased with dollars and euros that have been funneled through Swiss bank accounts that Brad Birkenfeld brought to you and Scott Bennett brought to you. And that's part of the information that Snowden and the WikiLeaks cables will be releasing pretty soon.
See, and I really want to say that for everybody out there listening, we've seen a rise in the consciousness of, the entire planet. But at the hub of it, the United States dollar is really, the driving force mechanism. And what people have been trying, very deliberately to good American people who are in service to the people, what they've been trying to do is expose the fact that the wealth of tax dollars that people have been, working their blood, sweat, and tears and then donating to their government and their country, that it has been going to facilitate the bombing and the global positioning for oil in Eurasia and the false flag setup of Baloney Benghazi and the Osama bin Laden raid. These types of things are all propaganda to facilitate good people such as yourself continuing to do their job without asking questions. But luckily, you have a heart that is big enough, and we've learned in the last century that the heart has more neurotransmitters than the brain does.
Yeah.
And your heart has been strong enough to really do a phenomenal, amazing job, because by all intents and purposes, you should have given up a long time ago, and you should not be doing as well as you're doing now, with this big smile on your face.
Yeah.
And really, the people, this needs to get out to the people in a way that they can comprehend it and understand. And one of the things that I wanted to say in regards to Jesselyn Raddick and Gap, it could be that, at the end of the day, they do have, investors that really call the shots around statistical.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And,
absolutely.
Maybe perhaps you somehow got in the criteria with Snowden coming up, got bumped to the back burner.
Well, you're exactly right, and I understand that. I understand. I'm not into this whole thing for any purpose other than to make the truth known, to honor my oath as an officer, and serve the American people by giving them intelligence information that's not classified that they would want to know.
Absolutely. We're going to go to break, and we're going to be right back with my guest, Doc Bennett. Thanks, everyone.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. Revolution Radio.
You don't see it, do you? How close we are to absolute chaos? The sick ones are sitting on their fat asses, eating and drink themselves into a stupor, polluting the world without a second thought while it goes down the toilet. Nobody wants to do the nasty work. The shit that we all just think about. Most good citizens are just along for the ride and then bitch and moan and complain about everything when it doesn't work out. Not me. Get it done.
Revolution Radio, where we do the nasty work. www.freedomslips.com. message to our listeners. Revolution Radio is you. Thanks to your continuous support and participation, Revolution Radio will embark on its 5th year! Woohoo! Bigger and better than ever. You, the listeners, have made Revolution Radio what it is. The #1 commercial-free talk radio station on the web with nearly 24 hours of live programming, delivering directly to you the most cutting-edge information available. You, the listeners, have become some of our most popular radio hosts. You, the listeners, offer feedback that molds our programming to appeal to a worldwide audience. You, the listener, provide eyes on the ground, reporting about newsworthy events in your area, and you, the listener, are the lifeblood of this station. We love you, and thank you for being a treasured member of our Revolution Radio family. From all of us to all of you, have a happy and safe holiday season, and let's make this new year a success once again together. Thank you. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Eva Moore. This is Evolution on Revolution Radio, and it is December 21st, 2014. We've just come through a majorly quick year. This year has flown by so quickly, and if you're listening to the show tonight, you've been listening to my guest, Scott Bennett, who is a whistleblower, and he's been providing some background, kind of the guy that has done all of the footwork to gather the foundation for which other whistleblowers, such as Edward Snowden and Julian Assange, has provided these vital information that gets gathered and researched and diligently compiled by people like my guest here tonight. If you enjoy these shows and enjoy the freedom of information that you're receiving tonight, please take the time to support Revolution Radio and our sister station, Wolf Spirit Radio, that we are simulcasting on, and as well your hosts and my guest. So if you're interested in finding out more about what Scott Bennett has diligently compiled, he has now offered the reports that he submitted to, I believe, Congress and many, many more people that were in powerful positions to make an effect change with this information at their fingertips, and they failed to do so. So for the people, it is up to us to start to, now that we have channels such as Revolution Radio, to gather testimony from very amazing Americans who have done their due diligence. It's up to us, the people, to now get behind people such as Scott Bennett and really demand that his evidence be given the spotlight that it deserves. And actually, Scott, this is something I was going to talk to you about. Jesslyn Raddick, you were mentioning earlier, she works for the Government Accountability Project. Well, something I was thinking about is perhaps we could get a petition together that would facilitate the people, giving the people means to get behind you, to really drive this forward, because really that's what's needed. Is the demographics need this information at their fingertips, and we need to get them to start to feel like they have a voice as well in empowering you.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. We've been pondering that, and Greg Morse, who I've been working with, who is a brilliant old Navy F-4 pilot who has brought in the entire mortgage scandal, the mortgage crisis, and how a lot of the derivatives and the mortgage escapades of 2008 were actually used in a lot of banking, funny business, and a lot of things that were skimmed off the top have went into black budgets and wound up funding a lot of ISIS issues. He and I have put together a petition along those lines on his website, saveourfamilyandhome.com. So it's something that we definitely, in the new year, we want to even run further with. A lot of the material, I mean, this is empowering to people because you find out that no one in the American political or military establishment has any character or strength or conviction or intelligence to have done anything with this, because no one has done anything. And no one in the media has done anything aside from intrepid souls such as yourself, Kerry Cassidy, John Wells, a few other people, Mike Harris, have had the bravery to really look at this and analyze it and to question it and to review the documents. But everyone at Fox News that I sent this to in 2012, 2013, Mike, Sean Hannity, Britt Hume, Bill O'Reilly, Rush Limbaugh, Monica Crowley, Laura Ingraham, all of the usual suspects at Fox News, not one of them did anything with this, never even responded. And I've got copies of all the letters that went up to them in the book on the website, exhibits. It's about 2 inches thick, but it's every single letter that went out to all of these media people saying, please examine this. The only media person who ever kind of accidentally stepped into this was Michael Isikoff of NBC News and Tom Hamburger of the Washington Post. And that was purely accidental because Michael Isikoff and Tom Hamburger had come up to me to do a story on Booz Allen Hamilton contractors that supposedly had went off the reservation. If you remember, in 2013, the Navy Yard in Washington, D.C. was the site of a shooting where this guy had a clearance before and he went off the reservation. Well, they wanted to do a story on contractors who had clearances. And they said, oh, here's a guy who was in prison, and they wanted to come up and try and do a story. And what they got was something entirely different. And they came up and met with me. That's awesome. And I said, look, I'm an officer of the United States Army. I've been railroaded in here because of what I was doing at U.S. Central Command. They've invented this incredibly crazy and unconstitutional prosecution against me for the first time in the history of the United States. I'm a military officer, and they've charged me with wearing my uniform as if I'm a civilian with no affiliation with the military. And they've thrown a false statement charge at me because I filled out a housing form, apparently without orders properly designed. That's a military issue. And these guys walked in saying, well, how did this happen? What did you do? And I said, well, here's what I did. And I started naming names. Dov Zakheim, Terrorist Financing, U.S. Central Command, Booz Allen Hamilton, Swiss accounts, European accounts. All of this information was put forth in reports. None of it's classified. And the moment they started hearing about this, and I said, Brad Birkenfeld, the guy right down the hall, is the Swiss banker. You can contact Jesselyn Raddick and his attorneys, and they will corroborate this material. And they basically got hit with a tsunami, and they didn't know what to do with it. They were like deers in the headlights. And I said, here's all the documentation, here's all the paperwork. You go forth and do good things and contact me. Contact my military lawyers, Avi Stone, Major Avi Stone. He's the guy that they sent up there. And I pinned him against the wall and said, what the hell am I doing in a prison? Your job is to get me out because what they've done is completely illegal. And he sort of hemmed and hawed and said, well, I don't know what's happened. Well, that's your job to find out because I'm a soldier. I put my name on the oath and agreed to go and die. That means you agreed to protect me and come in case there's a misunderstanding. And that's what this is. No one did a single thing. Michael Isikoff and Tom Hamburger run like dogs that had been whipped in the backside and went back to the Washington Post and MSNBC and didn't do a single thing with this story. And they never returned any of the documents or the reports that I gave them, despite numerous letters demanding that they return them to me. And that's the story of the American media. It was not until I got out of prison that I was able to take all this documentation, and I shared it with a lot of different people in case anything happened to me, and a lot more that hasn't yet come out, and said, this needs to come out now. I'm putting it on the web. It's unclassified, and now we're just starting to get this out to the American people. And I'm talking to American Blue Star Moms and American Legion and Veterans of Foreign Wars to say, this is a intelligence constitutional crisis where soldiers are still being killed, and congressmen and senators and high brass military officials are doing nothing with this. Hold them to account. If anyone is wearing the uniform, you need to step in and say, what are we doing about Swiss bank accounts? Because if I'm being deployed, I want to make sure I'm not going to get blown up by a bomb that's been bought and paid for through a Swiss account.
Right.
And that's actionable intelligence.
Mm-hmm. So recently there was an investigation into HSBC Mexico where basically testimony came forward that HSBC in Mexico was laundering finances through their accounts to like Iraq, Syria, Libya, to facilitate the purchasing or the laundering of money. It goes in the threes. It's drugs, guns, and the laundering of money, and the fourth would be the sex trade.
Yes.
This is really what props up the American dollar as well, and it's nasty. Yes. And so what I'm most grateful for about this show tonight is we simulcast through the UK, and so what this is a means to let the international community know that the propaganda that is perpetrated about the American people is just as false as the propaganda that the media perpetrates inside the borders of the United States to inundate the American people with false information. And so what I'm most happy and honored is to be a conduit for you to reach an international community and to really let the world know that there are good Americans doing their job that are willing to go to jail and sacrifice 3 years of their lives and potential, capability to find work now as a felon. The damage that it takes on your loved ones and your health, because let's be honest, you saw yourself that people get small injuries inside of prison and do not get the necessary care that would, normally make it an inconsequential injury that then prolongs into something much more serious. And then the psychological damage that just not being able to see colors, not being able to see more than 100 feet, not having a sense of touch, like just being able to hug somebody and feel safe. So as a soldier, you are accustomed to these types of risks, but I think what's important is that that both the American listeners and the international community know that there are very good, diligent people who are standing up for the Constitution and for what is their oath and taking a high toll. And so when we band together and we get the everyday average Joe behind you, it makes all of the sacrifices that you've made worth something. And now it's just a matter of educating the public on and empowering them and facilitating a channel of action. Yes.
Well, you said it brilliantly, and that is that the international community, the people who love freedom and love transparency and are not out for a global hegemonic imperial agenda, are those people who are now becoming educated and stepping up and learning about this material and simultaneously holding their political leaders to the fire. And let it be known that the British knew all about this. The British intelligence and the British embassy were advised on all of these materials, and they were not classified, but the British intelligence services were advised. The Union Bank of Switzerland, and Brad Birkenfeld have Swiss bank accounts that are being used to fund terrorism. They got a copy of my report. It was not classified, so the British should be held to account by every British citizen and should be challenged to say, what have you done with this? MI6, MI5? You are not a poodle dog to be servants of the United States Imperial Praetorian Guard. You represent the interests of the United Kingdom. You represent the interests of the Commonwealth all over the globe. And that is an obscene failure. Cameron and the Prime Minister and his staff before him have covered this up completely and done nothing with it. That's something that needs to be held and advanced forward. I think George Galloway is a character to pick that up. I've had some wonderful correspondence with some of the brilliant 9/11 researchers and people that really have shined a light on the false flag operation of the Pentagon attack and the September 11th attacks. And the forensic evidence and materials that they have analyzed and disclosed is absolutely mind-blowing. And you walk away knowing absolutely that it was a false flag inside job. And what is, little known is, I'll admit I drank the Kool-Aid when I was in the military and as a contractor. I worked in the Bush administration from 2003 and 2008. And I never wanted to believe it was a false flag. I never wanted to believe that it was an artificial Pearl Harbor. But my boss, Dov Zakheim, was the man who wrote the entire thesis. When he wrote for Project for a New American Century, Dov Zakheim wrote what we need is a new Pearl Harbor. And that avalanche of revelation is really starting to build up now, where I think the community of Americans and international people really, you theoretically could have a French Revolution with a little bit more class, but a real upheaval to say this entire 9/11 decade has been a bloodbath and a waste, and it's been an imperial experiment where you've tried to sprinkle the fairy dust of neoconservatism in these Middle Eastern countries, and instead you have just decimated what little culture and fabric and political organization they've had, and you've caused chaos. Barbara Honegger has done some wonderful work on the Pentagon attacks. She's contacted me, and I've had some great conversations with people like Ken O'Keefe. I have been let down, I will admit, by some of the other media that I thought would step up, like RT. Abby Martin has refused to touch this because it's connected to Michael Hastings. Michael Hastings got a copy of my report and my letters and was looking into the connection between Stanley McChrystal and the psychological operations community because he knew very well that PSYOP, psychological operations, is part of the entire strategic communications agenda to smother and blanket the American airwaves and international airwaves with the message that terrorism is at the front door. If we don't have a, threat level Homeland Security orange, we could have a smoking gun and a mushroom cloud. All that is propaganda. And Michael Hastings knew that, and he was looking into the connection between Birkenfeld, UBS, myself, and Snowden when he was killed.
Yeah, and I really see, everything that everything from your lack of response from the media to even the interactions with GAP and the legal system, Congress. It to me is just that textbook primer that Naomi Wolf talks about in her studies of how to close an open society. And there's 10 steps. And one is to subvert the rule of law. One is to create a place where torture takes place.
Yes.
One is to shut down the media and
Yes.
to identify people in the media or in power positions and make examples of them, like Michael Hastings.
Yes.
The next is to declare or to allow a paramilitary or to create a paramilitary that is not accountable to the rule of law, which was backwater when Congress let them pass and allowed them to start to have contracts on U.S. soil.
Yes.
So we've got the primer. We know what the steps are. Now the key is to open the society, and it can happen. And the way that you do that is through actually making sure you can get this information across the board and power in numbers. And
Yes.
when strong hearts like such as yourself are partnered with other people such as Jesselyn Reddick, or people who are willing to take the steps to walk that line, that razor's edge of integrity, knowing that there are consequences, knowing that there's no guarantees that there
Yes.
won't be any repercussions, but with their hearts on fire. And
Yes.
so, seriously, you are a shining example of what it means to be an American and somebody who is on this earth as a global member of a new society that stands for integrity no matter what. And it's just a blessing that at this time we have the internet to facilitate your message.
Yes. Yeah.
One of the questions, go ahead.
That's exactly the heart is I haven't done a single thing by my own strength. My faith is in my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. God is my Father in heaven, who's given me every ounce of energy, every thought, every articulation of truth, every connection that I've ever made, the stamina to get through the 10 hours of torture that I endured at the hands of the American military, the stamina to get through the solitary confinement and the shackles and the trauma that they've put me through. The only thing that got me through was God strengthening me and realizing I'm going through this fire for a purpose, to come out on the other side and say, it's not me, it's not my strength, I didn't engineer this, I didn't plan this, I just was obedient and did, go forth and send me. Here am I, Lord. And I've tried to humbly do that every step of the way. And everything I say and everything I write and any person I come in contact with, I always share with them, it is not about me, it is about God in leading this forward and just being truthful and being honorable in speaking the honest truth. And the miracle of this was that you couldn't make it up, and it just came together and fell together in such an amazing, miraculous way, where I'm sent to go into the military after the Bush administration, and I'm in the highest circles of counterterrorism at the State Department, at Special Operations Command, at Central Command, and I'm targeting all the bad guy finance accounts. I'm after all the Swiss accounts and all the Haqqani network accounts and all the Middle Eastern banks that are going through Europe and Switzerland and Africa and the Middle East. That's my job. And I'm employed by Dov Zakheim, one of the biggest engineers in the 9/11 fraud and scam. And suddenly they discovered that I'm not one of their boys. I'm not one of their conspirators. I'm an American patriot, a soldier, and I'm trying to solve a problem, win a war, and go home to my crops and my family, and not live on an endless defense contracting, $200,000 a year job, which most of these guys do.
Exactly.
And it's turned in. Then they think they can throw me in prison and cover it up. And little do they know, instead of going to California like I was supposed to, I wind up in Pennsylvania. And I meet, by chance, Brad Birkenfeld, the UBS Swiss banker whistleblower, who was all over the media, 60 Minutes, and I'd never heard of him before. I'd never met him. I never knew anything about him until we wind up in the same prison, and we, over 6 months, look at every document, every bank account, every letter, every WikiLeaks cable, and we have this miraculous, astounding story where his information, had we met outside, we could have shut down the entire finance of the war on terror. But some people didn't want that to happen. But we did it in prison, and we got out, and then we made it known. The cat was out of the bag. Now, Brad is an honorable man. He's just been threatened and bribed, and I think they've said, you either take this money or we're going to kill you. And his lawyers have said the same thing. So I know he's looking at me right now saying, attaboy, keep going, keep saying what you're saying, because it's absolutely true. I just can't say it for you, Scott, because they've threatened me, they've threatened my family, but you can say it.
Well, he's quite the character. I was doing some research into some background articles, and there was one that he did with Global where, he was quite forthright. We're going to go to break, and when we come back, we're going to carry on with my guest, Scott Bennett, the Honorable Scott Bennett.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here. Revolution Radio.
You don't see it, do you? How close we are to absolute chaos? The sick ones are sitting on their fat asses, eating and drink themselves into a stupor, polluting the world without a second thought while it goes down the toilet. Nobody wants to do the nasty work. You know, the shit that we all just think about. Most good citizens are just along for the ride and then bitch and moan and complain about everything when it doesn't work out.
Not me.
Get it done.
Revolution Radio, where we do the nasty work. www.freedomslips.com. Transcending time and space, let us take you to the place inside your mind where thoughts divide and mysteries unwind. Join us every Monday evening right here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, and you will catch the Fenton Perspective with our great host, Lorian Fenton. Come listen in as she shares her amazing stories from the past to present, along with all of her guest secrets to the future. That's the Fenton Perspective every Monday evening right here from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Revolution Radio. Oh, and you don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Feel that things were not quite right, that everything was just ever so slightly askew?
Do you have, to paraphrase Morpheus, a splinter in your mind?
If you're interested in hearing the latest information about UFOs, the paranormal,
ancient cultures and structures,
monatomic elements,
longevity,
fantastic discoveries in science,
Download it to your brain.
Then tune into us. Hi, I'm Dave.
And I'm Maggie.
And we are Shiny Side Out, Sundays 2 to 4 a.m. Eastern. See you then.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's December 21st, 2014. We're at the top of the second hour with my guest, Scott Bennett. We're having a wonderful pre-Christmas chat about all kinds of naughty Swiss elves and the corruption that was going on and the work that my guest Scott has done in organizing the data to compile for all of us, the people, the information that we need to be able to be educated on what is really going on, both within the United States and what is being facilitated with the United States tax dollar and usurped for its original purpose, and being basically driven to, defense contractors and the facilitation of fictitious wars and the financing and paying off of rogue CIA-trained operatives that create havoc all around the world under an illusion of the bad guys, only to, wreak havoc on the Earth and devastate this planet's surface, both in the hearts and minds of the people and through bombing and destruction of communities. So thank you so much for being here, Scott, and for your work and your pound of flesh and then some that you've paid.
Well, it's funny when you're talking about CIA. One side note I wanted to throw out, and it's in the materials I put up there. But when they sent me out of Pennsylvania in February, instead of flying me, which they should have done, they sent me on a bus to kind of torture me a little bit more. So here's a 4 or 5 day bus ride, in freezing cold weather in the middle of winter, just to try and hit me even harder. Again, all of this I treated like a military operation going through SEER school. So in a sense, it was sort of like a challenge to see how much I could endure. But
for the listener, can you explain what SEER school is?
SEER school is a military school they send you to for search, evasion, resistance, and escape, where they torture you, they waterboard you, they hunt you down, they pretend like you've been captured by as a prisoner of war. And you're being interrogated by enemy armies, and you have to endure all sorts of trauma and psychological resistance. And really, I thought at the time when they first stopped me at Medill Air Force Base and held me at gunpoint and forcibly took me on base and put me in a cell and put my arms behind my back and all these horrific things, locked me in a car for 10 hours in the Florida sun. I thought, this is part of my SEER training. They're prepping me for an operation. They're prepping me for deployment. And because I was told you're going to be put through training. So I never questioned it. I thought this is all part of an operation. I didn't discover till much later it was all nonsense. But when that's part of the reason that this whole prison experience has been like water off a duck's back. I've taken it, and I'm like, okay, is that all? Is that the best you've got? Is that all you can do to me? Well, let me tell you, now it's my turn to step into the arena and look at all the stuff I've found out. I've met the Swiss banker, and all you guys are going to hang. All of you guys are going to be drugged before some men of Congress who have some character, and you're going to be questioned before Senate and House Intelligence new committees that'll run Boehner out on a rail and some of these other clowns and say, who is going to be responsible for this? Dianne Feinstein. You've got reports from Bennett for the last 2 years, and you've covered it up. But not to digress. But when they sent me out from Pennsylvania to California,
it's called diesel therapy. Is that correct?
Diesel therapy. That's right. Absolute torture. And they sent me out to California, and they put me in a halfway house. And this halfway house is full of rapists, murderers, and people that come from high-level, penitentiary who've been in jail for 10, 15, 25, 30 years, not for guys who come from camps. No one ever goes to a halfway house if you're from a camp, which is a white collar where doctors, lawyers, and stockbrokers go. Well, they sent me to a halfway house. Why? I don't know. Maybe they were going to try and bump me off or something. But they sent me to this halfway house, and I'm stuck there for a month. But one of the things I discovered was, and they never anticipated this, they are teaching a class in these halfway houses, the Department of Justice, mind you, teaching a class titled Deep Black, the history of the CIA operations in drug operations around the world, working with Mossad and assassinating journalists, military people. And you just saw a little bit of it. There was a movie that came out over the summertime about the journalist Webb. I can't remember the title, but that was a story about a journalist who uncovered the CIA drug operations. Well, the Department of Justice is teaching inmates who get out of jail and go to a halfway house. They're teaching them, lecturing to them, and I've got a copy of the syllabus, that the CIA have been running all this drug operation. You're in jail because the CIA, you ran afoul of the CIA system. The CIA is in charge of the U.S. drug trade. The CIA is in charge of the poppy fields in Afghanistan. The CIA has been working with Mossad in the sex slave trade industry in Israel that finances a lot of these operations. It blew my mind, and I got a copy of that, and I sent it to the court in Florida saying, I've already went through drug training, and because they have on your probation, you have to go through training classes. And I wrote and said, I've already been through this training. Here it is. And its title is CIA Drug Operations. So I've asked the court to recognize this class as a legitimate class.
So you're documenting it.
If it's legitimate, I'm documenting. I'm putting it all on the documentation. And I'm saying, if this class is true, you damn well better take my motion and send it right up to the Congress and demand that they investigate this class that's saying the CIA is killing military guys, running drugs. Or if it's not true, then you better pay me and every other inmate that you've brainwashed and psychologically damaged with lies. Because you've told inmates that their government, their Central Intelligence Agency, has been running drug operations and killing soldiers. And that was one of the little perks that I discovered coming out here. And you're right, I've documented it and I've put it out there because you couldn't make this up. And Carrie Cassidy had said, well, why do you think they're doing that? And she had wisely said, because they're trying to recruit more drug operatives for the CIA systems.
And this is something, again, I would really love to stress to the international community that's listening. I've had the luxury of spending 2 years boots on the ground here in the United States with the people who are wide awake, hearts on fire, and willing to step up, everyday average Joes. And for the international community, I don't think they really understand what is going on an everyday level. Thank goodness for your training. The fact is, you did go through SEER school. I myself did not have that luxury. I've just gone through 2.5 years of federal prison and from the sidelines, but as invested as I possibly could, and I will tell you that I saw the faces and the hearts of the family members that are helpless to do anything for their loved ones on the inside. And if they do try, as I did, as Mark Emery's wife did, the inmates get diesel therapied which is what you just explained, or they get put into solitary confinement, which is what happened to my husband when I sent a chain email to the head of Washington State Probation, alerting people that there was a death threat put on my husband on the internet. And they put my husband in solitary confinement for 20 days. Terrible.
Eva, I can't stress how humbled and how honored I am to know that you have endured this. You are a paragon of virtue as a wife and a woman to have gone through this traumatic experience and supported your husband, because few women have the strength and the character to do what you did. So many women abandon their men, divorce, the family falls apart, the lives are ruined. But for you to have stood by and stood the storm is such a testament. And your husband I know he knows it, how lucky he is. But you have grown, and really prison the families go through more trouble and torment than the prisoner does, because you have to suffer, but you don't get the luxury of the camaraderie and the self development and the isolation and the self-cleansing and the self-reflection that comes with these monkish experiences. It's like you're in a monastery. But the wife and the children are the ones that really suffer. But you are exactly right. The Nazi Gestapo prison, Department of Justice, Federal Marshal Service, Bureau of Prisons, what they do to Americans in these prisons is absolutely unconscionable. I've seen men die who shouldn't be dead, who've died of heart attacks because of the stress they were put through in their 50s. I've seen men lose their legs because they've had a cavity that was ignored for a month and a half, and it had a connection to a nerve cancer issue. And my old bunkmate had to have his leg cut off because they ignored his medical condition. I've seen men given the wrong prescription medicine and their livers are eaten up and destroyed, and they're wheeled out and sent to hospice. And if they don't know how to type, or they don't have family, or they just don't know how to do things, they're dead men. And you're right, the wives or the families who step in and make a call to the warden and make it known that something's wrong, their husbands are sent to Timbuktu. They're sent thousands of miles away across the country, and they're absolutely tormented. So no one says or does anything, and it's absolutely a crime. And especially because in camps, for example, where you have doctors and lawyers and stockbrokers and people who aren't violent, they're not out robbing banks or doing serious Al Capone drug things. They're in there for insider trading, or in a lot of cases, they're not guilty of really anything. And the big psyop in the American society is like, well, everybody who says they go to prison they say they're innocent. You know what? Most of them in a camp I know are innocent because they've been roped in and railroaded into a fabricated false prosecution, and they're told by the prosecutor, you either take a plea deal for 1 or 5 years, or we're going to throw 25 years at you.
And they're intimidated, and they're bold.
And they're intimidated.
And
they cut a plea, and then they can never appeal. Now me, I never took a plea. I went to court.
Yeah, neither
I went
did my
to trial.
husband. Neither did my husband.
And that's good, because your husband can, till the day he dies, can always put back in the court system a motion to have himself completely exonerated. If you don't take a plea and you go to trial, you can fight till the rest of your life to have yourself vindicated, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to fight until I die to have this entire case thrown out and have everybody pulled in and held to account for what they did to me. Because what they did to me, they could do to every American soldier. Every soldier who comes back from war and goes to visit his little daughter at kindergarten dressed in his uniform, they can throw into a federal prison like they did to me. Every soldier who fills out a housing form or some sort of moving your household goods onto base, if you dot an I wrong, they can file a false statement charge against you and throw you into a federal prison. If they don't like your political allegiance, they don't like that you are a conservative or a liberal for that case, they can file federal charges against you in a civilian court. For that reason, my case can't be allowed to stand. It has to be, and it'll go back in front of the courts, and if it has to, it'll go in front of the appeals court, and if it has to, it'll go in front of the Supreme Court to say, Scott Bennett is an example of the American soldier, and you cannot prosecute him in a civilian court with these charges because it is a complete miscarriage of justice. It's a perversion of the statutes and laws that the American people have put on the books. You cannot be allowed to do it, and if you do get away with it, you are basically gutting the American military and threatening them. And basically you're setting up a dictatorship where the president can go into the military and cut out, through the Department of Justice, his executive branch. He can go into the military and gut anybody he doesn't want, and basically have the military serve his beck and call. That's not what Congress intended.
Well,
so
and I think
that's why it's encouraging.
Yeah, it goes back, and this is again, I thank you. Everything you just said was phenomenal, and this is what the international community needs to hear, is that from the outside, it looks like the American people don't care, that they're just shopping and going to, keep their status quo. And to some extent, that happens, to some extent. But I think what's really going on that is not seen is the terror and the fear that is, of course it's starting to hit the media now that with police brutality, but this has been going on since 9/11, since the loss, since the Patriot Act was put in place. Basically, it has been a closing society, and because of the shock and awe of 9/11 and the propaganda that was perpetrated, and the subconscious minds were wide open from, the shock of those towers and the repetition of the images.
Yes.
The subconscious is wide open. So with the media just telling us it's the brown guys over there, those bad guys over there, those bad guys over there with the box cutters, it's like, oh, okay, it was the box cutters, and our subconsciouses just take that in because of the shock. And it's taken us this long to recover from that shock, and in the meantime, in the background, there's been this juggernaut of systematic destabilization of the whole structure of the country.
Yes.
And so people such as yourself could be put into positions of false, and that is the usurpation and subversion of the judicial system, which is part of that primer. So you are an exception to the rule, and it's men like you and others that stand, that have the fortitude to not take a plea and say absolutely not. And not only that, because that just in and of itself is a huge burden. It is. But then to recover and to be willing to keep going. When did you put your website together? Because your website is amazing, and then these 3 books are amazing. Can you tell everybody about your website? Yeah,
the website just was put together when I got out of prison. I put it together in, about 2 months after I got out. I took every document that's up there was written in prison. Every document that's up there was sent to Congress and the military in prison. Every letter that was sent out to these congressmen and senators and media people were sent out in prison. And all of the documentation, the WikiLeaks cables and the Union Bank of Switzerland accounts, all came to me from Brad Birkenfeld. All of that material that he gave me, I in turn put into a report, an official military whistleblowing report, and sent up to my military chain of command and my political chain of command, saying very specifically in legal language, I am a United States military officer. I am unconstitutionally and illegally incarcerated. I am making known to you, the United States Senate, the United States House of Representatives, the Joint Chairman, Chiefs of Staff, General Martin Dempsey, Secretary of the Army, Ray Odierno, that United States military resources and personnel are being killed with money that is financing terrorism through Swiss banks. Here is the documentation. Debrief me. This material has come to me through unclassified sources, specifically the whistleblower himself, Brad Birkenfeld. I have more material. He has more material. Please debrief me so we can provide it. I didn't go right to the media and dump it all out. I went my chain of command because I wanted to protect soldiers' lives. I wanted to protect contractors. I was expecting them to come in like cavalry and say, Bennett, we never knew you were in prison. We can't believe this has happened to you. Who's to blame for this? What do you have? I thought they were going to come riding in on a white horse and say, we're sorry, this is a big misunderstanding, snafu, but now we're going to make it right. Let's look at all this material and move forward in a positive mission. Nothing. Not a single word was said. Not a single letter was sent to me. Not a single phone call. And I had family in California sending out public press releases and packages of information to media and political figures, and no one did anything. They completely buried their head. And the sickening thing is that some mothers and fathers' kids are dead because of the cowardice and the corruption of these political leaders like Dianne Feinstein, like Howard Buck McKeon, who's chief of staff. I've talked to on the phone, and they keep telling me, well, you have to contact your congressman or senator. We don't have anything to do with that. And I've said, you do have something to do with that. You are chairman of the Armed Services Committee. That is your role, is to take care of business that affects members of the armed services. I'm not coming to you as a constituent. I'm coming to you as a military officer. They've done nothing. And up until February of this year, 2014, from July 23rd, 2012, until this February 2014, I was an official military officer on the books in the United States Army. How they could ever have left me up there and still kept me in the Army is beyond me. But it's one of the many things that will be brought back into the court of law. The hope is, and the truth is, so many military guys don't know anything about this. Mm-hmm. So many military guys don't have a clue that the whole 9/11 shenanigan psyop was completely false. It was a complete false flag operation designed to run on a crazy crusade through the Middle East. Mm. But they're now discovering it. Yeah. They're now starting to digest and look at it. And, that's one thing that's beautiful about the American patriot, the American spirit. Americans are like a sleeping giant. Once you get them woken up, once they get a hold of something, once they smell blood in the water, once they learn they've been deceived and lied to, my God, there is not an enemy on the face of the planet that I would fear more than the American citizen. Because they're brash, they're bold, they're fearless, they know how to unify, they've got the Christian heritage that stretches back before 1776 until now, and they will take the government and shake it by the scruff of the neck and take the country back. And there's a lot of promise and there's a lot of hope. And I hope and pray that we begin to really move quickly in 2015 with this new Congress. And one thing to do immediately is stop the brakes on this out-of-control war machine that's gearing up to go against Ukraine and Russia and China. Mm-hmm. Because that is an absolute, waterfall we're in the danger of going over. So it's a little bit more of a... One thing I wanted to say, you had mentioned Brad Birkenfeld and done a little bit of research into Brad and his materials. Let me just say, Brad is a brilliant man. I love the guy. He's one of the smartest guys I've ever met. And he was so angry about what they did to him. He was so furious at Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. He was so furious at Tim Geithner, who was in charge of the New York Fed. He was furious at Kevin O'Connor and Kevin Downing and Lanny Brewer and Eric Holder, all of whom were tied with Covington and Burling, the law firm that represented UBS, and the railroading of him. He was furious at President Obama, who was a senator on Senator Levin's permanent subcommittee of investigations at the time Birkenfeld gave his testimony. He was furious at Carl Levin. He was furious at John McCain, because all of those guys were given his material, and he gave it to them in the best interest of the people of the United States. He gave it to them to say, this is for my fellow American citizens. And I don't mean to sound Pollyanna-ish, but that really is in the heart of when we do things like this, is we're coming to say, this is to serve my country. This is to serve our people. And use this. Do something with this. That's why we voted you in office. That's why you're occupying a job in the Department of Justice and the Department of State. And instead, they betrayed him. Mm-hmm. And in fact, there's a case to say they tried to kill him. Mm-hmm. A lot of the WikiLeaks cables that come out of the State Department, I said, Brad, I was at the State Department when these cables were getting written. I worked for Ambassador Del Daly at the State Department Counterterrorism Office. I know all about this stuff. And I never once heard about you or was told about you, and you never once heard about me. And that's where we came together.
I have a quote from the Global Post 2005 that he was interviewed, and he said, it says, when Birkenfield went to his boss and demanded an explanation, the boss brushed him off, and Birkenfield blew his stack. I said, I'll effing go outside with you right now. I want some answers, and I want them now.
Yeah. Brad he's a big guy. I mean, he's 6'3" or 4, and he is just, he's tenacious. He went to military school in high school, so he's got a lot of military, character in him and a lot of integrity, and he's fearless. And he grabbed this originally. And I mean, the story was phenomenal, and so many other guys that I'm happy to put you in touch with that you can talk to and confirm. Absolutely. They'll tell you everything that I'm telling you that Brad told them and that know me too. The whole story, you couldn't make up. But Brad had told this phenomenally weird story on how everybody had tried to bury him, and they charged him with the very same material that he gave them in his Senate testimony, and they refused to let him use that to exonerate himself.
Sounds like Chelsea and Manning. We're going to go to break and be back the last half hour with my guest, Scott Bennett.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Enjoy your extra big-ass fries.
You didn't give me no fries. I got an empty box.
Would you like another extra big-ass fries?
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is 0. Please come back when you can afford to make a purchase.
No.
I'm sorry you're having
trouble.
trouble.
Come on. My kids are starving.
Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we believe in freedom of ideas, freedom of speech, but above all, we believe in freedom of existence through self-reliance. This station is 100% listener-supported, and as a fundraising promotion, I have a kick-ass free gift for a $100 donation. 35,000 seeds. 25 years in the freezer. Long-term storable, 54 different varieties. So if food prices go crazy, the shit hits the fan, or you just want to save tons of money every year by creating your own food like I do, grab our Seed Pack Special. Just look for the banner on the homepage at freedomslips.com. Don't be a statistic. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. We need to ask humans to start taking care of ourselves and not depending on the megacorps to provide unhealthy, nasty food. Included in this package is also a DVD with 900 survival and off-grid living documents and the offline home canning how to do everything website all on the DVD. So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What we do in life, that goes in eternity.
once again time for Ohio Exopolitics Radio with your host, Mark Snyder. Join him with his ongoing research of the fact that we may not be alone.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's December 21st, 2014, and we're at the last half hour here of the show with my guest, Scott Bennett. He's a whistleblower, and he is a phenomenal example of American patriotism and dedication to Constitution, to ethics, and defending one's oath that one swears. Scott, we were talking before the break about Brad Birkenfeld and his amazing character, and it cut you off there. Did you want to carry on, or?
Well, one of the things that we're going to be doing in 2015 and coming up in January and February and March is returning to Washington, D.C., returning to the Congress, and going into their individual offices in the House and the Senate, and hand-delivering this report and all the other subsequent materials that have come forth to challenge face-to-face, eye-to-eye, and say, here's the report, you've received copies, here are all the letters I've sent to you prior, and I'm giving it to you, hand-delivering it to you right now. And what I'm telling you is the same thing I've told you since 2012 that you've stuck your head in the ground and done nothing with, and I'm hand-delivering it to you with the cameras, with the Blue Star moms, with other military service members at my side, with parents whose kids have been killed, to say, you are guilty of sticking your head and causing men to be killed and maimed. You've got blood on your hands. You've betrayed your oath as a political representative. What have you to say? What have you got to say about yourself? And that will go throughout the halls of Congress as well as the Pentagon. And that, in turn, should have a ripple effect that can shake things up in Washington. The next, of course, is going through the universities in this country and going to all the young people and saying, this is your country, this is what's going on in your name. If you're not careful, if you don't step up and do something, you're going to be drafted. You think because you're in college, you're not going to be forced to put on a uniform and go fight a bunch of savages in the Middle East? That's the next step. That's what the kids in Vietnam thought. Well, I'm not going to go to war. Next thing, you're drafted and you're sent off, and you have no desire to fight in the military. That can very easily happen.
Well, yes, and same with Guantanamo Bay. So Guantanamo Bay is in Cuba, but it's technically United States soil. So
yes.
The fact that we're allowing excessive torture, now we've got all of these disclosures that have just come out around CIA torture. And this is something that the international community is really quite concerned with, and it really needs to be of the utmost priorities, closing Guantanamo, because as long as that is open, it is precedent that allows on U.S. soil torture. And so therefore things like diesel therapy and the way you were treated, which would be equivalent to torture in your SEER training, can transpire on U.S. soil. So this is critical. And you are very correct in what you're saying. And so it goes both ways. Both the American people need to understand the precedent that Guantanamo sets, but also that logistically the torture that is condoned or allowed, in Guantanamo is under the guise of, a rough and tough federal Bureau of Prisons is happening to the American people. And, you are lucky enough to have SEER training, but not every American does.
Eva, I'll tell you, and you'll know this too. The American Bureau of Prisons, these jails, these prisons, you don't get any medical care. You don't get any dental care. All of your teeth fall out. If you don't brush and floss, the best you can hope for is dentures. You don't get the right medication. God help you if you've got a back injury. I've seen men in agony, and you're sleeping on steel beds, old men in their 80s, in steel beds and paper suits, absolutely tortured. The sadistic nature of the Bureau of Prisons under this Department of Justice makes Nazi Germany look like a Girl Scout convention. I know people kind of wash it off and say, well, prisoners deserve to be punished and all that. We're all in agreement for guys to go out and rape and pillage and mug and do all sorts of horrific crimes. But that's not the case here. We're talking about guys who are in for petty little things, petty crimes, or white-collar stuff, who are dying. I knew a guy, Scott Hockler, who was a multimillionaire, and they came after him with all sorts of false nonsense and had him in jail. And he was appealing, but he died of a heart attack because he couldn't handle the stress. That happens to a lot of men. So many of them. The list is phenomenal. And they're absolutely tortured in prison. Now, the whole CIA thing right now, you've got a precedent for war crimes. You've got a precedent for cases to be brought in the United Nations court,
Hague.
The Hague court, to drag Cheney and Bush and these other people, and perhaps others in head of CIA, Porter Goss, or David Petraeus, or Secretary Hillary Clinton, or anybody who knew about this.
Yeah.
Drag them before the war crimes like they did to Milosevic.
What I thought was really interesting is I did see an interview where Petraeus did on air admit that Guantanamo Bay was in direct violation to the Geneva Convention. And it was shortly after that interview that his sex scandal blew.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they cornered him, they tagged him, they infiltrated his email, they do that intentionally. They did the same thing to Brad Birkenfeld. They tracked him, they got his email, and they set him up to pinch him. I mean, Brad went before the Senate and told them everything that he had, and they came back at him and said, you didn't tell us about this one client named Olenikov. And Brad said, yes, I did. Check the transcripts. Talk to my lawyers. And they wrote back an email, oh yes, you did. Our mistake. And then shortly after that, they called him back in and said, we're indicting you for the Olenikov material. Take a plea. And he said, what are you talking about? I told you all of the Olenikov material at my Senate testimony. And they said, that Senate testimony is sealed. You cannot access it. You cannot use it for evidence. And that was that. Brad had nothing to defend himself with. So they betrayed him, once again, taking the material that he gave them in good faith, under the Castigar agreement, under an agreement of immunity. They betrayed him and said, no, we're going to prosecute you using the very material that you gave us. They did the same thing, by the way, to the Quest Communications president, Joe Naccio. This is very significant. Joe Naccio, in 1999-2000, before September 11th ever hit, he had been doing contracts with NSA, Quest Communications, and NSA had come to him saying, we want access to all of your customer accounts. Joe Naccio said, I can't do that. Our lawyers will not let you have access. Those are our customers. They don't want their private information given to the NSA. They immediately came back at Joe Naccio, prosecuted him, dried up his federal contracts, and threw him into an insider trading charge. His son was in Georgetown, was approached by two men in suits, was stabbed in the arm, and one of the men in the suit said, say hi to your dad for us. So this isn't just cloak and dagger. Mm-hmm. These are murderous thugs wearing the badge of the United States government, calling themselves nephews of Uncle Sam. And every American should be disgusted, outraged, and stand up and begin moving forward in proactive political voices to say, we want to know more about this.
Yeah.
This isn't just standard corruption. This is off the reservation. This country is one step away from a Nazi Gestapo Germany dictatorship.
Exactly.
And we're not going to tolerate it.
And one of the things I wanted to follow up, like you had made, you gave me some beautiful feedback around my contribution in, supporting my husband.
Yep.
What I wanted to say is it has not been easy. It's been probably thousands of times harder than I ever expected, especially because I had no idea. I just knew that I wanted to help. And I could see what was happening and transpiring December 2011 in what was, systematically, secretly amended into the NDAA in December 2011. It really was cause for alarm. And, it was like Christmas Eve, too. It was just silly. And I knew I wanted to help. I knew my American brothers and sisters were, needing help. And it's been an honor. And one of the things I want to say is, I hope that all the listeners out there, and this is something I found, is that they look at me and see that it is possible for the everyday average Joe that has no background, no training, nothing, but desire to step up, that you can make a difference, a huge difference, and your heart will guide you and tell you. Yes. And it just is, all you have to do is go inside and commit to stepping up and listen to the guidance, the intrinsic guidance, and you will be guided, and just continue taking one step at a time. Yes. One of the things that my husband has been calling for is the fact that business as usual needs to stop, because it is, as you have diligently documented, the facilitation of the finances of the American dollar, the black side of what is financing the American dollar, that perpetuates all of this international chaos, and that the American people, the everyday Joes, have the power to come together in unified force and stop business as usual. If we could stop business as usual for just one day in multiple cities, that would have huge, and peacefully. And Naomi Wolf does a great job talking about how during peaceful protest you can sing, but one of the things my husband was saying is to stop traffic. If the flow of traffic around institutions, banking institutions, is cut off, then business as usual has to stop. And if one of the things, and maybe we might have to have you back, is what is one thing that you would suggest the American people need to know, and what would be a solution that would, can you give us that? Because you have so much more in depth.
One thing that strikes me about this entire episode, this entire journey, is, for me, it is symbolic of what the metamorphosis of every other American should feel and go through. And that is, when I started out, I was a hardcore Bush administration, conservative, Republican, right-wing, bought the Kool-Aid, and then I get wrapped up into the wormhole. I go into Alice's Wonderland's rabbit hole, and I come out the other side a different man, much more well-rounded, much more sort of libertarian in my thinking, going, whoa, wait a minute. We've been off the reservation on a wild crusade that was nothing but a bunch of lies, and it's caused me great pause. And I found I haven't been changed in my core convictions of family and God and some of my deep principles, but I have been changed in, I have less of an idolatry towards the military and the political establishment. I'm much more analytical, and causing me to question and really think through where we are as a nation and policy.
Absolutely.
And the benefit of that is I can now go to the left-wing, liberal, Occupy Wall Street types, the libertarian types, and say, we may not agree on everything, but we can agree on this. We can agree that we don't want to be tortured. We don't want to be put into Guantanamo Bay. We don't want America going all over the world stirring up wars that's going to cause a bunch of people to come over and shoot up kindergartens like they did in Pakistan, or just go absolute crazy and bomb synagogues or bomb churches or parades, or invent false flag opportunities for parades or other things to be hit to generate more of a police state. We can all agree on the core fundamentals of liberty, our civil rights, our Constitution, and let's move together in where we can agree and take back the reins of government and ease this police state and begin to change things back, starting with a lot of the Patriot Act draconian laws that we have that have resulted in people like me being thrown in jail, that have resulted in Susan Lindauer being thrown into jail for 9 months, a CIA asset. They threw her into prison, tortured her, and she was thrown in because she came forward and said the Iraqis have had nothing to do with 9/11. And then she begins to expose the trucks that were supposedly putting bombs inside the Twin Tower buildings, and Barbara Honegger's put some great work together. These people have all been incarcerated and tortured under the Patriot Act.
I love Susan Lindauer's quote about scream like hell. If when they come to you, just scream, keep screaming, and keep screaming, and keep screaming as loud as you can.
Yes.
And that it really. You
have to fight through the fight. In military training, you were always told, when you're ambushed, fight on, fight through it. Put the knife in your teeth and charge. Do not stop. Just keep attacking. And that's what Susan Lindauer has done. That's what Brad has done, even though he's taken a deviation because he's been threatened by all sorts of corruption. That's what I'm trying to do. That's what Greg Morse is doing on the mortgage crisis. Attacking, moving forward, not in reckless, crazy, anarchist, revolutionary ways or for any desires. Not at all. We want to implement the truth and show what's happened, to hold the lawbreakers accountable, to have them prosecuted in courts of law, to have men of character step up in the political circles and change the laws back so that the United States is less of a police state and begin more of a diplomatic, intelligent, psychological information operation outreach to these Muslim countries, and Russia, and China. There's no reason why we have to embark on this war machine agenda, except people who work and live in war get paid. Men who work in the war machine, who leave the military, simply jump on board and become defense contractors and get $250,000 a year. And they don't care. They have no conscience.
What's interesting is Petraeus. He's now the fracking go-to pimp. He's pimping fracking now. Yeah, it's all about money. It's all about power. These are old men. That's one point I try and make very much, is that young men between the ages of 18 and 40, we're the ones who are out wearing the uniforms, in the trenches, fighting, working all the time. These old men over 60 are not in the fight. They're out there in the positions of power. They're on Capitol Hill. They're above the rank of major in the Pentagon with the cushy jobs. They're going to the embassy balls. They're going to the Booz Allen Hamilton $5 million a year Christmas parties. They're the ones who are simply moving the policies and the chessboard, but it's the young men who are between 18 years of age and 40 who are the ones who are dying and bloodied and being sent and deployed and losing their families, coming back home with post-traumatic stress and full of drugs because the military fills them full of sleeping pills and all sorts of things. Ethan McCord. Are you familiar with Ethan McCord?
Yes.
Yeah. Ethan has done a phenomenal job at just, being very transparent in his struggles. And I think the fact that he is vulnerable enough to be open and say, I really struggle. And to allow that to be okay, and not hide it, I think he's role modeling for a lot of other men that they're not alone. And that's the one thing is like, that's the one thing that this system tries to convince you of is like, you're all alone. Nobody cares. Nobody can help you. No, you're not going to make a difference. You might as well just shut up and go away and just suffer and like, just deal with it. Yeah. So absolutely, I agree. And the rate of PTSD and suicide in connection is unacceptable. And as, you know, somebody who has gone through PTSD, like that, so another thing that caused me to jump up and, you know, Scott, I would love to have you back. And certainly. I would like to open the phone lines next time you come because I'm sure there'll be a lot of interesting conversations. You know, is there anything else that you would like to leave the listeners with? And again, can you repeat your website and give maybe a small description of the books that you have? Yeah, the website, anybody can go up and you can get the materials up there, is the website's www.armypsyop, that's ARMYPSYOP .wix.com/Scott Bennett. Or you can Google Shell Game Scott Bennett and it'll bring up the documents and the website. And you can download them from Lulu, and that basically provides you with all of the material, the history, the documentation that people can take to their congressman, their senator, their media, their newspaper guy, their churches, their veterans of foreign wars, their American Legion, their bowling clubs, their Mason, whatever groups they're involved with, and say, look, this is something I just discovered. This is a military guy. He's reported financing terrorism, and no one's done anything about it. And your son is serving in the military. He could be killed because of this. You have a stake in the game. Step up and do something. And every American needs to begin outreaching and spreading the word and becoming proactive and connecting with your churches and starting, you know, groups to actually stand up and be mobilized. Prayer groups are very key, very important. I have a lot of people praying for me, and that's what keeps me going. I see the light at the end of the tunnel. I see things getting better. I see the country getting better because we're not going to give up. We're not going to back down. We're not going to surrender. We are going to continue moving forward. Until the breath is gone out of my body, I will take everything that I've learned and take it up to the highest levels of the Pentagon, the highest levels of Congress, and demand that they look me in the eye and give an explanation. Because there's only two ways to go. Either you do something with it, and you stop the terrorist financing, and you stop this out-of-control war machine, or you continue to stick your head in the sand. But they will be replaced. And the other prayer is men of good character need to stand up and run for office and take political leadership. Mm-hmm. And it's not about money, it's about character. If you step on a podium and you speak with conviction, you will defeat any multimillionaire. A half-hearted half-wit who may have a lot of money is has no chance to win against someone who's full of passion and full of truth and full of God's blessing. So that would be my hope, that men and women who hear this are inspired and recognize, you know, it's not me, it's my Father in heaven who's given me the conviction, and I'm going to move forward. And I thank you for being so courageous to have me on, because few people will. Abby Martin and RT and all these people, they won't touch it. They won't touch the story, because Hastings has been killed because of it. Brad Birkenfell's been silenced. Jesselyn Raddick and all these groups are quivering and cowering. But I'm inspired that Julian Assange and Edward Snowden and myself and Birkenfeld are all slowly bringing this together. And it's with people like you helping that we're going to succeed. Well, thank you. I've learned so much from my husband, and he is, you know, an amazing man, and his heart is on fire. And, you know, you've got, I think, about 4 months freedom ahead of Bill, but you know, this is a similar path. So I really resonate with what you're doing and how well you're doing. The other thing I wanted to say is the real currency. As the American dollar is falling, as the price of gas is falling, and, you know, people are being encouraged not to invest in resources, which is a falseness, because really that's the real resource.
It is.
Or the real commodity. The true investments are in people and in people's hearts and their success that are moving in truth. And I really feel that you are just like I can't even put it into words what you're doing, and to be a part of what you're doing is an honor.
Thank you.
Could you share? You had a quote about some of the quotes that helped you get through. Can you share those?
Yeah, happy to. I mean, some of the words of faith that I had in the darkest hours of prison, and cold cement cells and paper suits, and standing outside in the 10-degree winter winds in shackles. The words that comforted me were the words, from God's word, that He shall give His angels charge over thee, and keep thee in all thy ways, and no weapon formed against ye shall prosper. And, see if I will not open the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing upon you cannot contain. To whom much is given, much shall be expected. God calls us in storms. We're not to live a life of cushy luxury and sleep away life. We're to be in the fight, in the battle. We're to be putting out the fire, not water in our garden.
Thank you for listening to Revolution
What a beautiful
Radio.
show. Merry Christmas to everyone. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.